Live from the Export Beer Garden studios, you're listening to the BYC. It had often said that cricket can be a cruel game. On Friday, the 4th of November 2022, at the beautiful Bay Oval in Tauranga, for the annual Dulux Tradies 11 versus the ACC 11, the cricketing world witnessed an act that reverberated around the globe. An act so callous, so horrific, that cricket lovers everywhere could only shake their heads in disbelief and disgust. Being run out is one of the more unfortunate ways to be dismissed. But even worse is to be run out in circumstances that bring shame and forever blights the reputation of the guilty party. For that travesty to be caught on camera only exacerbates the situation. I have in the last few days received tearful apologies from my BYC colleague Dylan Cleaver, whose extraordinary act of self-preservation, whose blatant disregard for his partner has seen him inundated with abuse online. I cannot stand for this. The fallout from the Dulux Tradies event has hit him hard, and I have dug deep to forgive him, and so must you. The fact that it was probably the worst example of sawing off your partner is by the by. And besides, we have more important things to focus on, like the semi-finals of the T20 World Cup. G'day, Dylan.
I don't know if that makes me feel better that you've forgiven me or worse. But we are going to forensically analyse this a little bit later, but thanks for forgiving me, mate. And thanks
mate, I had to.
Thanks for calling the hounds off. It's just been ridiculous.
Oh, I tell you what, for a few days there, Paul Ford, the resentment was bubbling away. It was all over the interweb there. My humiliation is the only way to phrase it. I think the travesty that was that runner. And quite frankly, I'm glad that a little bit later on in the podcast, we will forensically go through it, because I believe, Mr. Speaker, that my case is impenetrable, and we'll get into that a little bit later. But fellas, the T20 World Cup. We're down to the business end. New Zealand through to the semis yet again, fighting off against the mercurial Pakistanis, who will, let's be honest, be feeling a little bit lucky to get there, and may have the attitude, I believe, of there's nothing to lose now, boys. Let's go all the way, Dylan Cleaver.
Yeah, well, is Pakistan lucky to get there? I mean, South Africa losing to Netherlands has got nothing to do with them, I guess, and they did thrash South Africa previously.
True.
So I'm not sure if luck comes into it, and also they just beat New Zealand in the Antarctic Series in New Zealand conditions in the final. They did it by attacking a couple of weak points in that New Zealand lineup. So I think it's just going to be a fascinating semi-final. Can't wait. Very
much, and we'll get into that a little bit later on. But let's have a little chit-chat, Paul Ford, about the game against Ireland. Tricky opponents. And Ireland have very much covered themselves in glory, as far as I'm concerned. A really handy side, and one of those sides that we could not afford to underestimate. We didn't. We had a good game plan, but she was a bit shaky there at times.
Yeah, they've been quite impressive, Ireland, haven't they? A really niggly team to come up against that you kind of think in your head there's no history of them having beaten us. But they're getting closer and closer. It's great to see those, I guess, second-tier teams threatening to break into the first tier. I guess my number one observation about this game is I bloody told you guys we'd win. I told you.
Yeah, well, very, just as well we did, Paul Ford.
And so I just want to say that you guys might be responsible for commentary curses, but I seem to have a bit of a free pass, and I'll be using it again later on. Yeah, look, and great to see, and we'll talk about this, I'm sure, Kane Williamson going through the gears. But just before we do, we've got to acknowledge we've come up against a hat-trick.
Yes,
Josh Little,
yeah.
Sensational, 3 wickets, 2 atrocious and ill-fated reviews as well, along with that hat-trick. And, well bowled Josh Little. They beat England, the Irish, and did a lot of good things throughout the tournament. But it was lovely to see New Zealand as the first team into the semi-final.
Well, I think, because we're such a well-organised side, we sort of know our game plan. We're a little less likely to stumble against those teams. And, of course, we would never underestimate a team like Ireland, Dylan Cleaver. But as Paul Ford mentioned, it's nice to see Steady the Ship start to respond to what has been a growing amount of criticism with regards to his strike rate.
Probably the first sustained negative media attention he's had in his career.
Yes.
You know, I know when he first came into the team, he had a great start, and then he fell off a little bit. But that's what you expect from a young player. I think this last 12 months, it's probably the first time he's been copping it from multiple angles at once. And look, the reason he's been getting grief is because of his strike rate in T20 cricket and hasn't been up to scratch. But this is Kane at his best, kind of setting the table, and then when he's got that 15, 20 balls under his belt, then he suddenly accesses parts of the ground that others don't usually do either, because his game's not based around raw slogging power. It's based around the offside a lot. So, yeah, it was really good to see. There's part of me that wants to throw a little bit of a fly in the ointment and say, well, the Irish bowling attack's hardly like facing Shaheen Shah Afridi.
Yes.
Shadab. That could be a little bit trickier from here on in, but that's what we want from him, and he delivered.
Do you think, Paul Ford, that Steady the Ship is the sort of player that actually takes the comments of the public and the media to heart? Or do you think he's experienced enough now to know his own game and not feel that kind of pressure?
I think he's one of the most on-the-level players that we've probably ever seen in the history of the game, to be honest. And I think you can even see it after scoring that 35 ball 61, basically to win the game. It's not like it was fist pumps carrying on, any kind of outward emotion at all. Just the archetypal low-key Edmund Hillary, Daniel Vittori type Kiwi, and his comment. It was nice to get some momentum. I mean, this is about as low-key a dude as you can get. Look, I think that, and I would hate to jinx it, but he's possibly, potentially going to be in a bit of a juicy wee purple patch of runs over the next 5 days. And, I think that he still didn't look $1 million in that innings against Ireland. You know, he hit it in the air a lot. I saw one commentator describe his innings as a bit scratchy and a bit scrapey and a bit swipey. But I guess this is the thing he's got, and I guess we've talked about going through the gears, but he's actually got a pretty incredible array of shots and bailout options and plan Bs, and he can go through those. And I guess we've talked about it before, but him batting the way that he does, where he sets that platform and then tees off, and that second bit's crucial, really does give hitters like Mitchell and Neesham and Phillips a license to attack from the first ball at the other end.
Yeah, well, maybe it really is a case of him coming into form at just the right time of the tournament. Paul Ford just mentioned Mitchell there, got to spend a bit of time at the crease. Important for him. He hasn't had a lot of cricket.
Yeah, he had the
injury.
What was it, broken finger?
Yeah.
Was it?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so he came in a little bit rusty, and he did look a little bit rusty initially. He is also, he does probably have that license, as Paul mentioned, to go from ball one, but he's a guy that does like a few balls himself. Like, he's not your classic Neesham, Michael Bracewell type that does actually try and hit a six first ball he faces. So, look, it's the more players we've got coming into form as we hit a knockout stage of a tournament is great. So, yeah, I can't see him not featuring in the semi-final. He'll be there, and he's a very important figure for us, either number 5 or 6.
Yeah, very much so. Very crucial to the team's batting now, Paul Ford. And that's sort of been over the last year and a half. He's really proven himself and taken his opportunities, Mitchell. And you get the feeling, too, that mentally he likes a contest. He likes to be under pressure.
Yep, and there's no trauma there. I mean, he's only played Pakistan once in T20 internationals. He's playing with a fracture in his hand, so I guess he probably feels like he's in the bonus round. If we look at what he did a year ago in that World Cup semi-final, 72 off 40-odd balls or whatever it was in Abu Dhabi against the Poms, he's a guy that is absolutely got the ability to step up in the big games and obviously loves the big stage and getting an opportunity. He's due. Great to see him back in that middle order. It gives it some steel along with the terrific form of Phillips. I saw an interesting thing, actually, just in terms of his mindset. The BBC had a good piece on him, and it talked about how he's only had a New Zealand cricket contract since 2021, so he's actually lived quite a bit of life. And, when he was just on domestic contracts and stuff, he was just a strength and conditioning coach working at Rugby Park in Hamilton. So, he's got a bit more perspective maybe than some other players. And I think that maturity shines through in the way that he's playing.
Yeah, very much so. Life experience, you can't beat it, Dylan Cleaver.
Yeah, he also grew up in Perth.
Right.
Didn't grow up there, sorry. Spent some important formative years in Perth playing senior club cricket there. So I think Paul mentioned the word steal.
Yes.
I think that's probably quite appropriate.
Yeah. Let's talk about our bowling attack. How are we feeling about that? It's feeling
Wonderful.
relatively settled at the moment, relatively balanced.
Well, I actually think it's a beautifully balanced bowling attack. And the thing that I find a little bit strange about this is it's a better balanced bowling attack than what we normally go into a test match with.
Yes.
So we've got the out-and-out pace of a Ferguson, and if he's unfit, a Milne. We've got the two swing bowlers in Southey and Bolt. We've got Rispin and Sodhi. If you can call it Rispin, I think he's predominantly a kind of wrong-end slider bowler now, but still Rispin. And then obviously we got Mitchell Santner, who, a lot of critics say he can't bowl a hoop downhill in Test cricket, but he's got this wonderful guile and ability to frustrate the hell out of white ball batsmen. So it's a great attack. I think it's the strongest attack in the tournament.
Very much so, and I would agree with that. Santner, Paul Ford, bowling beautifully at the moment, has a real box of tricks, doesn't he? And he really varies it up, and batsmen really struggling to play him.
Yeah, that's right. And let's not forget that he didn't play that, what do we call it? The Antarctic series against Pakistan. He was unavailable. I think he was on paternity duty from memory. And so, I'm not saying he's an unknown quantity to them, but certainly they haven't faced him recently, which I think is helpful. You talked about that balanced attack, Dylan. And I think the other thing is, balanced, yes, settled, yes, and, massively experienced. I mean, the five bowlers that we've only used five bowlers in this tournament. So, it's a pretty obvious plan. And, yes, that might work into the favour of the batsmen who know maybe what's coming, but also you've kind of got the fact that our guys have done it all before and lots of experience. Kane Williamson was talking this week about a massive advantage that they have is with that group of bowlers in particular and the likes of Devon Conway, that they have got a real art at reading the pitch and understanding what conditions will suit what bowlers, when to bowl, all of that type of thing. So the actual understanding of the physical conditions at the ground is another strength that attack, that I guess that experienced attack bring to the party.
Well, just on the question of stability, and I think it's a really important one. We went for a little while on the BYC discussing, are we on the downward slide? Are we doing this? Do we need to bring in new blood and so forth? Maybe right now we need to acknowledge that the selectors got it right in many respects. They felt that they had the team to compete at the World Cup. You mentioned that stability which we have. They know each other's game. They know their own games. So in many ways, Dylan Cleaver, kudos to the selectors for sticking with a tried and true side.
Yeah, although I'm going to push back slightly on that, and that I think the T20 we actually have introduced a little bit of new blood.
Yes.
Newish blood. Like your Glenn Phillips, your Mark Chapmans, were more inclined to pay out and out pace in white ball cricket. My argument around overstability, if that's a word.
Yes.
Perhaps getting stuck in a rut.
Predictability?
Yes, would probably apply more to their red ball game at the moment.
Well, but I would counter that argument. It's like, teams know what the All Blacks are going to bring to the park, right?
Yeah, and they started beating them.
Or they have now, but in the past when we were actually good. But there's a very big difference, Paul Ford, by knowing what's going to come on the park and actually playing against what's coming on the park. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, I do. And it's not like we've just got, five bowlers that bowl you kind of metronomic length and you just work it out. There's a hell of a lot of variation, Santner with his varied run-ups and arm heights and, pace and, all that variation, I think makes it particularly tricky. I think that this tournament has, I'm trying to think of the words, kind of played into New Zealand's hands a bit, because I think it has been relatively helpful to the bowlers. And we've got a bloody good attack, as we're just talking about. You put in a pretty helpful bunch of kookaburra deliveries. The fact that there's big boundaries, the ovals are quite big. There's been a bit of weather about. There's a bit of bounce. I saw Crickvid said that it was actually the lowest run rate for any T20 World Cup in history, sort of 7.4 runs per over average. So, average score of 147. That actually plays into our strengths, I think, rather than trying to mow down,
Absolutely.
200, 220 throughout the tournament.
Yeah, well, I'm always a big fan that the bowlers get a bit of a go in the shorter form of the game. I don't like the bash fests. England, Dylan Cleaver overcome Sri Lanka through dangerous side.
Yeah, and they needed to. It became a pretty simple equation at the end. They win, they get in.
Yes.
They lose, Australia get in.
Geez, they pushed it bloody tight, though, didn't they?
Oh, they wobbled.
I mean,
big
it was
time.
like, come on, just finish. And Stokes got a lot of praise for, I mean, I reckon they should have finished that game 5 overs earlier and just got on with it.
But they got over the line. They did start to wobble. They had a really good start with Hales, didn't they?
He's in form.
Yeah, and
70 for none after 6.
yeah, and
It should have been a canter.
the commentators had wrapped it up, and they started talking about the semi-final, which is always dangerous. But Sri Lanka's spinners came on. It was a little bit of a sticky one in Sydney, which is something to bear in mind before we play Pakistan tonight.
Ooh.
Sorry, Dylan, you go.
No, that's it. The floor is yours.
I was just going to say, it felt like it was pretty. Yeah, England love to set a total and then put the squeeze on, and it was quite interesting with them chasing, because I think they're still trying to play, baseball, but it came across as kind of stupid and reckless. And Stokes, yep, sure, he steadied it, but he played a few kind of hairy shots on his way to working out that maybe putting that in the back in the kit bag was a good idea. And they're still crapping on about positive mindsets and all that kind of stuff. So, yeah, it's interesting. It was a pretty wobbly run chase. As I say, they were 70 for none after 6 overs. That middle order looked pretty dicey. And, in that Sri Lankan... And they lost David Milan as well. So,
yes.
quite a tricky game for them in the end. As you say, they got out of jail. And Curran and Wood kind of saved their bacon against against Sri Lanka at the end of that innings. Sri Lanka lost 61 for 6 in the last 10 overs. So, they started with a hiss and a roar, and England could have been chasing a hell of a lot more, and it could have been a whole other story. England have been quite good in those last few overs. Curran's been brilliant.
Yeah, very much so. Tragically, fellas, it saddens me to say this.
Yeah,
I'm grief-stricken. Australia not getting through.
No,
What a bastard,
Quite emotional
eh?
this week, Jace.
What a bastard. How tragic. Your own tournament. I'm gutted for them, Cleaver.
shades of 92, isn't it? If they miss out, Pakistan get through. It's really interesting reading some of the stories coming out of that camp during the week. Just this general disbelief that they never once considered net run rate.
Yes.
Even in that, I think Daniel Vettori's on record as saying that it's been post the New Zealand hammering, they've actually been talking about, well, maybe we should have taken a different approach when the win probability was getting so low. Maybe we should have tried to limit our losses rather than
Yes.
go for improbable glory. And I think he's right. And yeah, they weren't at the races in terms of net run rate.
So un-Australian to chase the maths, isn't it?
Yeah,
it just
yeah.
seems like they're just not that mindset. They're the defending champs at home. They've actually had a lot of pressure, but they were massively on the back foot ever since that first over, from Finn Allen. Like, that really set the tone and seemed to take the wind out of the Aussie sails. I don't know, that was a blitzkrieg. And when you think about how many of those Aussie players were just massive flops in the tournament, Tim David Warner, Matthew Wade, even Cummins, Stark, Agar, Green Smith, heaps of them were absolutely shithouse. And I loved Glenn Maxwell, who came out this week and said, it doesn't matter, it doesn't mean anything, don't even care. It's like, oh, really? Who believes that for 1 second? I think they the other thing is, of course, we all know they were probably a win against England in a washed out game from being in the semi-finals, and everyone would think they're a brilliant team. So it does show how tight the margins are in a tournament like this.
Yeah, very much so. And it was our worst nightmare, wasn't it, fellas? The prospect of Australia and New Zealand in the final and them giving us a pantsing. Waiting! Hey, what the hell? The Netherlands smacking the South Africans. That's a turn up for the books, Dylan Cleaver.
Yeah, and there's a few in that Netherlands team who've got slightly South African-ish names.
Yes.
Or I guess it's the other way around, really, isn't it? Given that the Dutch are the root country of South Africa. But, yeah, it's really that was really curious. South Africa, after a really good start to the tournament.
Well, they looked great, didn't they?
In fact, Ian Chappell had already put them in the semis. He did a preview that stayed up on Cricket Info for a long time, saying how South Africa and New Zealand have the two best attacks. It'll be fascinating to see them go head to head. But the Dutch outplayed them, and South Africa have got, like Australia, they've got a few. I don't know. Can you call it the elephant in the room? Is the skipper just wasn't very good at all, and Tender Bavuma. A few players didn't come to the party there either, but I'd rather focus on the Dutch because they played bloody well to get into the main draw, and then they've just they've batted awfully, but they've hung around. Like, their attacks kept them in games, their catching, and I don't like using things that you can't really quantify as a strength of theirs, but they really feel like they've got a good team spirit thing going on there.
For sure. And you mentioned it earlier, Paul Ford, it's very nice, isn't it, to see these Tier 2 teams, not being easy beats, actually. And if you're not on your game, knocking over the top dogs. And that's a good thing to see for world cricket, I reckon.
Oh, totally, yeah. Look, and I think the fact that the Netherlands have been playing against the likes of New Zealand home and away, and a bunch of other teams as part of that ICC, whatever that stupid name of that competition is, I think it's probably meant that their players have just played a hell of a lot more cricket against good teams and start to realise that they are good enough to compete in those games. But yeah, it was a chaotic finish, that game on Sunday. It was just ridiculous. I mean, that was a fait accompli, dead rubber lay-down misere for South Africa. I just happened to glance at it. I was actually at the Phoenix game with my son, and it was half-time, and I thought, I wonder what the cricket score is, and it was all hell was breaking loose. That catch from Roelof van der Merwe, who was born in Joburg, amazing catch. And then incredible. In the batting, there's another guy, Colin Ackerman, who was born in George in South Africa, who was 9 off 11 balls, and then his last 15 balls, he whacked 32. It was just magnificent and a totally embarrassing capitulation from South Africa. I guess I was hoping that, I always knew that they'd have a choke in them in this tournament, and I was hoping it would be against New Zealand in the semi-final. So that's about my only thing that I feel bad about.
Great stuff. Well, I believe we've got some audio here, fellas, of the Netherlands singing their team song. So Pakistan had to beat the Bangers, and now it's another ICC semi-final between New Zealand and Pakistan. And that's tonight, fellas. Where are we at? What are your thoughts? I'll start. Black Caps, steady, will overcome some individual brilliance by Pakistan, New Zealand, Black Caps in the final. Dylan?
Yep. New Zealand win a ridiculously tight game that will have us on the edge of our seats at about 12:42 a.m.
Pull forward.
The team that wins the toss and bats first in this game wins it. So massively crucial toss. I think Sydney chasing under lights, second innings on that pitch. I just think it's going to be a really, really tricky, dicky run chase against either attack. So fingers crossed we bat first and score 200 again, like we did against the Aussies.
Good on you, mate. India, England, Dylan Cleaver, your thoughts?
India have got the best player in the world at the moment.
Yes. One player doesn't make a team, Dylan.
No. Surya,
especially when the best player gets run out horrifically.
No, I'm going to pick India to win that.
Oh, interesting. Pull forward.
I heard an amazing stat that Sky, Yadav, his average batting innings this year is 44 off 24 balls, and they've done the statistical analysis on him versus pace, and they've divided pace up into 6 hitting zones. He's hitting at over 100% in every single zone. So as a fast bowler, you cannot bowl it in a place that he has a weakness. That's pretty extraordinary. He's hitting wide full tosses on the offside over his shoulder for 6 over fine leg. I mean, he's a freak. So yeah, he's absolutely critical, I reckon. And I guess the equivalent from an English point of view, Butler and Hales, they're the top run scorers for England, but they're 100 runs behind Kohli and Yadav. So look, I think it's shutting down those guys that's going to make a massive difference. The interesting thing is England massively reliant actually on spin, more reliant than India on spin, which is quite something. And I just think England really haven't hit their straps, and I think India will tip them up. I think Rohit Sharma's due. He's 89 off 81 in the tournament, and they've got good disciplined pace bowling. Kumar, Shami and Ashwin, he's a cunning bugger. So yeah, for me, I think India sneak this one.
It's my happiness insurance final.
Yeah, India, Pakistan.
Yeah, New Zealand don't make it. I want it to be India, Pakistan.
Likewise, because what an event that would be. Right, well, here we are, fellas. The biblical balls up at the Bay Oval. Hoyte versus Cleaver. Now, if you don't know what we're talking about, we had the Dulux Tradies 11 match against the ACC 11 last Friday. And I can tell you that the ACC 11, the openers for that team were Hoyte and Cleaver.
We front-loaded our batting lineup.
Yeah, totally. We wanted to get off to a fiery start. In the second over...
First, was it?
No, second.
Okay.
Jace blocked out the first over.
Oh, he did too. Yes, yeah.
Excuse me. I only faced 2 balls at the first over. This is what happened.
Razor Ray Crockett taking up the attack for the Spartans.
Here he comes here. We're going to see what he's going to bowl. And, there's a little off-spinners there. We've got to mix up. And Hoyte is gone. He is gone. He's tripped over his own pad. It's half fallen off. He's ripped it off in disgust.
He didn't ground his bat. His pad came off. He was waddling down the wicket like a duck, and he is off. No, hang on a minute. There's a little bit of discussion here.
Are we going to have a look at this?
Are we going to have a look at this, or is there some kind of compensation? No, they're just...
No, as I'm aware.
Pulled him over to laugh at him to his face.
Here we go. I'll talk you through. I will talk you through.
You make your case.
I'll make my case. The ball that Dylan Cleaver was facing was turned behind square.
And I want it quite nicely.
Off the hip, behind square. Now, at the first point I want to make, the fieldsman was hardly Jonty Rhodes. He was quite a unit, and he sort of stumbled towards the ball. Now, immediately Cleaver played that shot. Hoyte called out clearly and loudly to Dylan Cleaver, yes! Given that it was turned behind square, Hoyte's called a mate. Cleaver then bounced up and down on the spot in his crease, or 2 or 3 paces out of his crease, then signalled no to the opposition wicketkeeper. By this stage, Hoyte had nearly reached his end of the pitch, had to stop, turn around, then run back to the other end, whilst at the same time both his pads were coming off and he was tripping over himself, and even then he was only run out by less than half a metre. And if you are arguing, Dylan Cleaver, that there was not a comfortable single in that, had you responded immediately to the call, then I frankly am lost for words.
It's great to hear the case for the prosecution from the alleged victim in this case. I'd now like to hear the case for the defence from an allegedly innocent man.
Yep. So there was a perfect storm of events, and you were unlucky. But But we need to go back actually to the night before the incident, where I was quietly minding my own business in the Astrolab, I believe it was, when someone whose name might rhyme with Pain and his good mate, whose name might rhyme with Curie, sidled up to me and said, "Hey, look, if Hoyte's got the big block on tomorrow, don't be shy in running him out." No.
Okay.
And I thought about this for a minute, and I thought that's a lot of pressure to put on a debutant. I've never played this game before. And I thought about it, and then we were walking out to bat at the Bay Oval, and I thought to myself, no, it's a beautiful day. The wicket's flat. How can I deny a man his right to spend time in an international wicket? Could be the only time in our lives we get to do that. And then to just bolster my sense of you were the right person to be out there with me, blunting the new ball, was that second ball in particular, you got right behind it, rock solid, elbow was pointing to the sky. So I thought, no, he's in here.
Thank you.
There's going to be a quick 40. So the point I want to make is that in no way was this deliberate, okay? Now, this is where the perfect storm came in. I am hard of hearing. I wear hearing aids, as you know. I can't wear them in a situation like that because they fall out, I stand on them, they get crushed, they're very expensive to replace. So I didn't have my hearing aids in. I also forgot my glasses, which was probably more critical. So I was feeling my way in the dark a little bit. But and my first over wasn't flash at all. I looked stupid out there. I was a bit embarrassed about how I was batting actually. But my sense of smell was on high alert, and I started to feel a little bit more comfortable in the crease by the time of the second over. And the ball, it was quite a sharp ball, just short of a length, and I was very pleased with myself.
Sharp, it was about 90k.
Yeah, that was sharp for a blind, deaf man. And I was very pleased with the way I whipped it off my hip. And I looked up, I must admit I wasn't looking at you. I looked to where the ball had gone, and I saw it had gone straight to a guy who was a big unit, but he was a former first-class player as well. So immediately my brain goes, you cannot take this guy on. He's got an arm like a rocket. And then I see...
In 1976.
then I see one of the more curious sights of my life is these little stumpy legs powering towards me and a big yes. And I immediately lifted my hands up, and we've got the tape stuck on the wall, and you will notice that when I clearly said no, you were barely halfway down the wicket. Probably not even halfway down the wicket. Oh. Now, if we roll the tape
Point of order.
If we roll the tape on to where you actually turned around, I have honestly seen Devonport ferries disembark their passengers and turn around and come back to town quicker than you managed to turn your surf around to get to the other end. So although there may have been a run if I'd taken off straight away, there was certainly so much time for you to get back once I made it very clear I was going nowhere.
Mr. Speaker...
It's a partial defence, but it's a defence nonetheless.
I rest my case, quite frankly. I rest my case. The fact that Cleaver there, first and foremost, the ball did not go straight to the field. It was to his right, slightly to his right. He had to move to his right to get it. Secondly,
you've just said he's a big unit. He could have moved.
You made the point. It took me forever to turn around, which only further enhances my argument that actually, and there was a clear single. And can I also make the point that you said you signalled no immediately? Not true, Mr. Speaker. You went 3 paces down the wicket, bounced up and down on the spot, and then lifted your...
No,
there we go.
No.
So, pull forward. Your call. Your call, pull forward.
Yeah, look, it's a pretty... Some of that footage is quite damning. With a massive discount for a person being both blind and deaf. And I think we've got to be careful about how we treat people with those sorts of limited abilities. What I am most worried about is that this run-out calamity, though, will... Well, first of all, it did set the tone for the ACC's defeat, and now I'm worried that it's threatening to divide the the Backyard Cricket podcast into factions forevermore, and that's what makes me feel a little bit sick. So I'm going to sit on the fence on this one.
No, straight to him.
I've forgiven him, Paul Ford. I've forgiven him. I had to, mate. I had to move on.
The indignity of the pads cannot be blamed on me either.
No.
Have we got a consensus that if you had strapped your pads on properly, you would have probably got back?
Can I make the point they were Mike Lane's pads and they were filthy and disgusting and falling apart?
Could I make the point that
yes,
that Mike Lane looked very, very sympathetic from the stands, didn't he, Jason?
Yeah, didn't he? He was crushed.
We got hammered too, by the way. We were hopeless.
Oh, yeah, bloody hope. I was feeling good too.
Oh, that back foot defence was impeccable.
Plunkett Shield, fellas, after round 3, Canterbury 12, Stags 10, Volts 10, Firebirds 11. Oh, no, hang on, I'm reading the wrong point. I was reading the bowling.
You're discombobulated now, aren't you?
Canterbury 44, Stags 41, Volts 27, Firebirds 27, Auckland Aces 26, Northern Districts 15.
Yeah, big wins this week for Central Districts over Northern Districts. Wellington got their season kind of underway with a big win at the Basin against Wellington, who have played all 3 games at the Basin before Christmas, all 3 on velvet green, kind of lurid green tops, been hammered in 2 of them. And Canterbury destroyed Otago, whose good start to the season may end up being yet another mirage.
False dawn.
Another false dawn in the deep south.
Yeah. In terms of the Golden Box, defending champion Tom Bruce CD 365, Tom Latham Canterbury 361, Cole McConchy Canterbury 322, the Silver Sweatband defending champion Brett Randall, Matthew Henry Canty 23, Jacob Duffy 18, Douglas Bracewell from CD of course 15, and Snowy McPeak of course 15. So there we go, boys, on the domestic scene.
Couple of double tons there.
Yeah, nice.
Cole McConkey and Schmulian from Sydney.
I actually I umpired him. Who does he play for? Central
He's Sydney now, but
he
went down from, I think he might be an East Coast Bays.
Yeah, he was. But I remember umpiring him. He was a bloody talented player, actually. Very talented. Waiting! But right now it's time for Paul Ford's News or Ruse.
Number 1, Team India have had a hectic schedule at the 2022 T20 World Cup with matches in Melbourne, Sydney, Perth, Adelaide, Melbourne, and now back to Adelaide for the semi-final. According to the Indian Express, the likes of Rahul Dravid, Virat Kohli and Rohit Sharma have given up their business class seats to the likes of Ashdeep Singh, Bhuvneshwar Kumar, Mohammad Sami and Hardik Pandya. This decision was taken in order to allow the big-legged fast bowlers some luxurious business class domestic flight leg room. Before the tournament, we decided that since the pace bowlers clock the maximum mileage on field day in, day out, they need to stretch their legs, a support staff member said. The ICC allocates 4 business class seats during a flight. Usually these are for the captain, the coach, the team manager, and a senior player. Now, number 2, there were bizarre scenes in West Indian domestic cricket, and cricket was deemed to be the loser on the day as Red Force responded to some very questionable tactics from the combined campuses and colleges 11 in the CG United Super 50 Cup. Red Force was 74 for 1 after 15 overs chasing 201 to win when rain stopped play for 3 hours. Then there was obviously this massive rain delay, and Red Force was set a revised target of 115 in 26 overs. Play resumed at 5 p.m. Chasing the revised score, the victory charge was stalled by the CCC bowling attack, who bowled a ridiculous and absolutely disgraceful 3.5 overs, 23 balls, in 35 minutes. The umpires called the game off because of bad light at 5:35, and given that there were only 18.5 overs bowled, they were 7 balls short of the mandatory 20 overs required for a result. Apparently, comical scenes as the bowlers would steam in and then sort of stop in their delivery stride and then go back to the top of their bowling mark. You had players falling to the ground and calling for multiple physiotherapists, trainers coming onto the field with drinks, and then they resorted to bowling massive wides. Absolute disgrace. The captain was none other than Dinesh Ramden, and to be frank, he should bloody well know better. And number 3, bringing together thousands of Virat Kohli fans, leading sportswear brand Puma, in a unique birthday tribute, created a massive mural of the Indian batting maestro by using 5,000 red cricket balls at Mumbai's Carter Road Amphitheatre. A 20-foot by 20-foot mural of Kohli's face was created in a marathon 9-hour activity that began at 8 a.m. It was our endeavour to bring them all together and make it a special birthday celebration for one of the most complete batsmen of this era, said Sarav Ganguly, Managing Director, Puma India, and Southeast Asia. What made the celebration even more special was the presence of Kohli's childhood coach, Rajkumar Sharma. It looks amazing and very creative, and I will send it to Virat as well. It fills my heart with great pride to see him getting this much love. There we go.
I'll go 3. That wasn't Virat Kohli's childhood coach.
I'm going 3, but you've got. I think the reason is that you said it was in Mumbai, and if it involved his childhood coach, he's from Delhi, Kohli. So I'm going to say it was in Delhi.
Pretty good this week, boys, but you are in the right neck of the woods. But it was the name of the man from Puma is not Sourav Ganguly, Dada, the warrior prince, Prince of Calcutta, the Bengal Tiger, Maharaja, god of the offside. He is, of course, El Presidente of the BCCI, and this was, I don't know if it's his brother or his cousin or no relation. Abhishek Ganguly is the king. So I'll point each to you boys.
Yeah, cool. That's fair enough. I'll take that. Hey, obscure players of the 90s.
Obscure players of the 90s.
Yeah, this one's so obscure, I've actually done in myself. Peter Marshall, Otago, left arm seamer of the early 90s. I think it might have been 92-93 season. Ring any bells for either you fellas?
No.
No, well, it didn't for me either. So I thought I would put out a bit of a clarion call to the ODT. And the email I got back from the sports editor, Hayden Meikle, was, bloody hell, never heard of him. And he's been at the ODT since the 90s as well. So this is super obscure. Now, Peter Marshall was born in Gore, probably played for Southland in that case, so it would have been one of those niggly Southland Hawk Cup, dry as a bone seamers, not a lot of pace, but get the ball stuck into that Queen's Park oval. We couldn't score off him for hours on end. But the reason I was attracted to him is that he only played 5 matches, took 15 wickets at an average of 26.8.
Yeah.
You would have thought that would have warranted an extended spell in the team, but he's disappeared. So now that the ODT can't help, I'm going to put it out there to any listeners. If you have information about what Peter Marshall might have done post-career, or maybe why his career ended early, drop us a line.
Paul Ford's Cricket Violence Corner.
Yeah, this week, the line of Lahore and former Pakistan Prime Minister Imran Khan says 3 bullets were taken out of his right leg after he was shot last week. Khan survived the shooting at a political rally in Gujranwala on Thursday, an incident that his party has called an assassination attempt. In an interview with CNN, Khan said, "They took out 3 bullets from my right leg. They left in some shrapnel inside." Imran Khan became the first Prime Minister in Pakistan's history to be ousted in a vote of no confidence after a few years, and has fallen out of favour with the all-powerful military, a crucial behind-the-scenes player in nuclear-armed Pakistan. Who can forget Imran Khan and that amazing story about him playing for Sydney University, going off for a shag with that blonde lady in his red sports car, and then coming back on and saying, "I will bowl now." And then cleaning up. Just an absolute legend of the game, but got some more scary things on his hands these days over in Pakistan political spheres.
Great stuff, Paul. Thanks for that. A bit of your correspondence now. This is from Mark in Christchurch. Still enjoying the Powercast. Thanks, gentlemen. Just wondering if you've read the Ross Taylor book, Black and White. If so, did any of the revelations surprise you? I was semi-shocked about some of the behaviour by certain players and administrators, but perhaps you guys were more aware of them, Paul Dylan Cleaver.
Yeah, I wasn't surprised by anything, really. It was a good score-settling biography. That was kind of predictable, I guess, after Brendan McCullum's score-settling biography that he put out himself. Nothing particularly scandalous comes to mind. I think the thing that will stick with me the longest is a chat that he recounted on the field before a game with Joe Root, where Joe Root was talking or complaining about how the Australians acted like complete pork chops when they drew the Ashes Test series. To which Tim Southey, quick as a flash, replied, "Yeah, a bit like how you guys acted when you drew that World Cup final," which I thought was very good. I thought it was a great line, and actually, strangely enough, despite all the controversy, that's probably the one thing that stuck with me the longest.
Paul Ford, I know you love your cricket literature.
I think there'll be a few guys quite pleased that they weren't named in that book around some of those incidents. The one that stuck out to me was when Ross Taylor was talking about his superstitions and how he went through a phase where his wife had to book his haircuts for him. So if he rang the hairdresser, so one time he rang the hairdresser to book his own haircut, got a duck, and then made a connection, and then so decided that his wife had to ring and make his hairdressing appointments. I thought that was a disgrace and a shameful thing to reveal in that book.
Yeah, fair enough, mate. Hey, Dylan Cleaver, what's going on with the bounce?
The bounce is tracking along nicely, thank you. Dylan Cleaver, all one word, .substack.com. Sign up, it's free, and you'll get emails dropped into your inbox 3 or 4 times a week.
Great stuff, mate. Hey, well, listen, thanks so much for joining us on the BYC. Fellas, go the Black Caps. Go the Black Caps. Hopefully, this time next week, we'll be discussing a Black Caps T20 World Cup win.